Welcome back. So we might ask ourselves, looking at our teams and our companies, how strong is the culture, is the level of interaction in our companies today? Well, we've seen that jobs are becoming more creative and complex, that the category of non-routine cognitive work is the only job category with significant growth over the last decades, that our companies also involve more collaboration. So we spend more time interacting with each other, according to some studies, than we did 20 years ago, 50% more time. A recent Gallup poll found that only 3 in 10 workers strongly agreed that their opinion was counted at work. And in another study, executives at 600 companies who were asked if their employees could name the top 3 priorities of their companies. These executives, on average, predicted that around 64% of their workforce would probably know the top 3 priorities. In reality, only 2% knew. So on the one hand, we need more collaboration, more complex problem solving, but at the same time, fewer workers understand the purposes of the company and think that their opinion counts. So Google, in this context, growing and innovative company, they launched a research project to figure out what actually makes the perfect team. What are the norms, the qualities, the rules to compose a team that will be the highest performing team. So they did a 2-year study, which they looked at over 180 teams, 37,000 employees as a whole. And what they wanted to measure, they looked at all these different potential ways of describing the team, the age, their seniority, their gender, where they worked, how often they saw each other, different personality profiles. And they wanted to measure, based on all of those different variables, did the team meet its own goals, right? So that's how they were trying to measure quality for their team. And so they looked at all of these different parameters, including personality types, gender, age, how much they saw each other, and they couldn't find a single pattern. They found lots of potential patterns, but no strong tendency in the data. So, and this is the New York Times coverage of this story. When Rozovsky, who was one of the researchers, and her Google colleagues encountered the concept of psychological safety in academic papers, it was as if everything suddenly fell into place. One Google engineer, for instance, had told researchers that his team leader was direct and straightforward, which creates a safe space for you to take risks. That team, researchers estimated, was among Google's accomplished groups. By contrast, another engineer had told the researchers that his team leader has poor emotional control. He added, he panics over small issues and keeps trying to grab control. I would hate to be driving with him being in the passenger seat because he would keep trying to grab the steering wheel and crash the car. That team, researchers presumed, did not perform well. So what did Google find? Google found that there were several factors that these high-performing teams shared, and all of them related to how the groups interacted with one another, what meaning they shared, what how clear their goals were structured, how well they could depend on each other. But the number one, the fundamental behavior that predicted all the others was psychological safety. That the members of the team felt safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. The woman who has done more perhaps to uncover and explore this phenomenon of psychological safety is Professor Amy Edmondson of Harvard Business School. And her book, The Fearless Organization, summarizes over 20 years of research into how organizations work. Professor Edmondson says, psychological safety is not immunity from consequences, nor is it a state of high self-regard where we think we're really great all the time. In psychologically safe workplaces, people know they might fail. They might receive negative performance feedback or even lose their jobs. But in a psychologically safe workplace, people are not hindered by interpersonal fear. They feel willing and able to take the inherent interpersonal risks of danger, of candor. They fear holding back their full participation more than they fear sharing a potentially sensitive, threatening, or wrong idea. So again, psychological safety is not thinking that you're great. It's not having no fear at all, but it's having no fear of other people punishing you for saying something that you believe to be true. So why do we have this fear? Why do so many organizations have low levels of psychological safety? In one study that was led by Professor Edmondson, 85% of respondents reported at least one occasion where they felt unable to raise a concern with their bosses, even though they believed the issue was important. Why is this so common? Well, what Professor Edmondson argues in her book is that human beings, we have a bias toward the present. We discount the future. So that if we think that what we're going to say is going to cause us some immediate stress or awkwardness, we weigh that negative effect, that immediate effect, more than the possible long-term benefits of saying what we have to say. And so this leads to what Professor Edmondson calls an asymmetry of voice and silence. In the case of doubt, where should we say this, should we not say it, we tend to stay silent because it's safer. No one ever got fired for what they didn't say. So even though what we say might be adding a huge benefit to our company, our consideration of the risks is always weighted more towards the negative immediate effects than the positive long-term effects. So if we remember from our 7 drivers of collective intelligence that in order to make a smart group, you need people who have access to relevant information. Remember the crowd of 800 people who all had different information about how much things weighed, and that information came together to guess the weight of the cow. We need them to be cognitively diverse so that when they make mistakes, they don't all make the same mistakes because they think about the world differently. But then you could have the most intelligent individuals who are the most cognitively diverse, but if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel motivated to contribute and also safe in contributing, this is where groups that are individually smart can become collectively stupid. So this third driver of motivation and safety is extremely important to producing collective intelligence. Professor Edmondson says psychologically safe cultures are those where everyone feels safe to challenge, criticize, and say what they feel, where they understand the collective purpose and how they in particular contribute to it, and where each person contributes to collective learning, rituals and processes that can help the group solve hard problems and learn from one another. A psychologically safe culture is not, and this is a quote, one misconception about highly successful cultures is that they are happy, lighthearted places. This is Daniel Coyle from his book, The Culture Code. And this is mostly not the case. So when we think of psychologically safe cultures, it's not that everyone's happy and laughing all the time. These cultures are energized and engaged, but at their core, their members are oriented less around achieving happiness than around solving hard problems together. This task involves many moments of high candor feedback, uncomfortable truth-telling, when they confront the gap between where the group is right now and where it ought to be. So a psychologically safe team is not one where everyone feels comfortable all the time. It's one where we can say what we think in order to solve hard problems together, even when it makes us temporarily uncomfortable. So a very important insight from this book is Amy Edmondson says that not all failures are the same. So there are some failures that she calls preventable failures. These are deviations from recommended procedures that produce bad outcomes. So if there's a rule that says you should wear safety glasses on a construction site and you don't wear them, right, and you get hurt, that's a preventable failure. Another kind of failures are complex failures. These occur in contexts where there's a lot of factors coming together in a way that might never have happened before. So when a subway system floods, this is a failure. We don't want water in the subway, but it might have happened because of a combination of factors that we couldn't anticipate, that the problem was very complex and we had never seen it before. So we want to avoid complex failures, and we stay vigilant, but those are different from preventable failures that we could anticipate. And so what Professor Edmonds says is that, of course, these failures are not ones that we celebrate. We want to fix them. However, there's a third category of failures that Professor Edmondson calls intelligent failures. And these are the failures that come from exploring new territory. Remember what we said about wicked problems and adaptive challenges. When you solve a wicked problem, when you take on an adaptive challenge, you are making experiments. And most of those experiments, maybe almost all of them, will produce some negative results. And so intelligent failures are results that no one wanted, but unlike the others, they're a necessary part of the learning process. So preventable failures, complex failures, we don't want to celebrate those. But intelligent failures, we do want to celebrate and we do want to encourage them. So you see here how these different types of failures compare. We can call preventable failures, in a sense, a deviation from a process. This is a descriptive term. And this might come from common causes are people not following the right behaviors, or people not having the right skills, or people not paying attention. And that could happen especially in production line manufacturing or fast food services or other kinds of industrial processes. Complex failures, we can think of these as breakdowns within a system. It could be emergent dysfunctions or some other unanticipated complex problem. And that could be in the context of a hospital or a space shuttle or nuclear power plant, the stories that we've seen before. Intelligent failures, this is not when the system has failed, right? These are when we're trying something new that hasn't worked as well as we've hoped. We could think of it as an unsuccessful trial, and this could be in coming up with a new medicine or a new fertilizer or another kind of new product design. And so these are intelligent failures because they are required in order to experiment and learn something new about the world. So you might ask, how can we create psychological safety? Now we've seen a little bit what it is and what it isn't. Well, what can we do to actually make our teams and organizations more safe? Well, Professor Edmondson shares another story about a company called Barry-Wehmiller. It's an engineering company based in St. Louis in the United States with around 12,000 employees, $3 billion of yearly revenue and facilities in 28 countries. In the early 2000s, the CEO named Bob Chapman, coming into this company, said, wow, something doesn't feel right about this culture. And so the new CEO comes in and says, we need new rituals to get feedback from people. And so he creates a series of listening sessions with the goal of creating an environment of trust and pride. And he receives a lot of honest feedback. People say that these time clocks in the facilities, break bells, and locking inventory in cages, so when people leaving for the day, expensive machines get locked in cages, that these rules, you have to check in and check out, you can only take a break when the bell rings, these all send the message to the employees of Barry-Wehmiller that employees are not really trusted. And so this is the feedback the CEO gets. And he says, okay, these are trust-destroying and demeaning practices. We get rid of them. No more time clocks, no more break bells, no more locking inventory in cages. So this begins an evolution, a positive change in the culture of his company. And not long after this, a crisis. The Great Recession of 2007-2009, the financial crisis, causes a rapid decline in new orders of equipment. And it seems at this point their revenues have gone way down, that they'd have to start laying people off. Chapman instead announces a program of what he calls shared sacrifice. All employees of the company would take an unpaid furlough of 4 weeks where they wouldn't be paid. He reduces his salary down to $10,500 a year. He eliminates all bonuses for senior managers, and he reduces the travel expenses of the managers. So everyone is going to have to sacrifice for us to get through this together without letting anybody go. He explains, in a caring family, all the family members would absorb some pain so that no member had to experience a dramatic loss. And he sets this example, and then what happens? Employees, on their own initiative, create a voluntary market to help each other. Those who can afford to take more than a month without pay trade in this voluntary market with those who cannot afford to take a month off. The company rallies from the recession easier than they expected, and by 2010 report a record financial results. No employees were laid off. So this story tells us what can happen in a company that creates a different kind of culture that treats people differently. People start treating each other differently, and then they can get through a crisis in a more positive way. So, in our class, we're going to explore how to build psychological safety within your team and organization. Professor Edmondson and Daniel Coyle, in his book, The Culture Code, give us lots of stories, lots of methods, and we're going to organize them in 4 parts. Part 1, clarify our purpose. Part 2, signal belonging. Part 3, invite participation. And Part 4, respond productively. So looking forward to seeing you in class, and we'll look at all of these together.